Welcome to this episode of Applied Christianity. We're talking with young adults about everyday issues, temptations, and battles they're having. We try to find biblical solutions and examples to apply to these issues. At Applied Christianity, we want to do more than provide generic guidance. We want to equip you with tactics enabling you to see real progress. The war is much larger than people realize. The enemy is way too crafty to only fight him on Sunday. Spiritual, flesh, and worldly temptations are coming at us 24/7. Doesn't it make sense that you need more than a Sunday service to combat them? We're in it with you, alongside of you, and for you. So let's dive right in. Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Applied Christianity. Our guest today is Evan. Evan, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice of you all to have me on.
Yeah, really super excited. So tell us a little bit about what's going on in your world today.
Yeah, so today, just woke up, wrapped some presents today, getting ready for that Christmas season coming up, and just getting ready for the podcast,
So so are you going to college right now? You graduated high school and college.
Yeah.
So what's going on with that in your as far as college, what you're majoring in, how far along are you?
Yeah. So I graduated Bullitt East 2 years ago. Great city, Mount Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to WKU right now. I'm a sophomore over there, studying exercise science.
Okay.
Super hard major, so a lot of studying, a lot of that. So
yeah, I like Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky has got such a great reputation in the state of Kentucky. They're doing really a lot of good things with their programs, with their facilities, their infrastructure. So I hear nothing but great things there. How are you enjoying the campus life?
Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving it a lot. There's a lot of things to do around Bowling Green. I would definitely say so.
Mm-hmm. So once you get your degree, is there a certain job you're looking at going into, or maybe a master's degree, or have you thought about that far ahead yet?
Yeah. So I had originally started going towards physical therapy, but I've since then changed my vision to occupational therapy. So that would just be like a master's program somewhere. Probably actually Murray State is where you say you teach at. So yeah, looking at that a lot.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's of course, I think about my time. I've spent a lot of time in the university setting, but it's a pretty neat place to stay and live. I mean, there's a lot of things to do on a college campus. Have looked at study abroad trips at all? Going to maybe looking at different countries, seeing how things are over there? Any chance of that?
Yeah, no, I haven't really looked that much, but it's always on the table.
Yeah, I basically led 3 study abroad trips when I was teaching at Murray State.
Mm-hmm.
And our best one was to Argentina. So we took some students over there for 3 weeks and looked at the winemaking industry and looked at the hazards associated with the winemaking industry. So it was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I had never been to Argentina. So pretty nice place. So if you get a chance, I would highly recommend, taking a study abroad trip. It's very inexpensive, but you get a chance to see other cultures and how they basically react and how you kind of, how they look at the world a little bit differently. So it kind of broadens your horizon a little bit. So, yeah. So in your Christian life, can you walk me through a little bit, like, how you started out in Christianity and how it's progressed a little bit and where you are today?
Yeah. So, I've always grown up in church my whole life, but obviously, like, I'm not saved through my parents. I'm not saved through going to church. I made a decision at an early age, around 3rd grade. I was like, okay, I'm going to commit my life to Christ. So I got baptized in 3rd grade, my bad. And since then, I just live for Christ. And there's been defining moments in my life where it's like, okay, like, I've taken a step. Like in 7th grade, I went on a mission trip with my mom to New York. And there was just so many coincidences over there that I just saw, like, God working there. And based off of that is like, okay, like, from this point on, I'm going to get in the Word every day. And since then, I've been in His Word every day, and I've not looked back. And it's been really great to see that Him work in my life. Like, trials and tribulations would come up. Like, I tore my ACL my senior year football, and man, I was devastated. But I knew God was calling me for something more. And before then, I felt like God calling me to serve somewhere in the church, like He commands us. Mm-hmm. And whenever I just dived into that, I started serving with middle school and elementary school, and I just found so much joy and fulfillment from that, much more than I would be in football. And that year we won a state championship, and it was really tough seeing that, not being able to play in that, but just like being able to serve, it was worth it. It was really nice to see God's plan work out in His favor.
Yeah, if one thing I always think about things I could do differently if I went back to when I was in high school, because I played sports in high school. I was a pretty good athlete, not superb, or wasn't getting a college scholarship or anything, but I enjoyed sports. But you never realize the influence you have over younger kids in your county,
Mhm.
like people playing for the Generals or the elementary schools. They're looking up to high school athletes like, hey, look at this. I want to be like this person. And I always thought back and, decisions I made or the influence I could have had teaching or at going to these summer camps and doing things.
Mhm.
I think you have so much more influence over those young kids. And I wish we would talk to more, student athletes or just people in high school saying, hey, you want to give back and give them the opportunity, because I think they'd see that and go, there's nothing more rewarding than doing something like this and helping a young kid out.
Man, I just look back on it too, and it's like, man, I had like no time doing football, and then like whenever my schedule got freed up, I was like, okay, God, like this is what we're gonna do now. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really good. And I hope the other young people are listening and thinking of that, because it's hard to understand, especially when you're 16, 17, or 18, can I make a difference? And I understand that, but you can make a difference, especially with somebody who is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Their eyes are on you, and you could make a difference in their lives. And there's so many opportunities to reach out and do that. So really, really hats off to you for that. So as part of this podcast is, I just felt a calling, because I think that young adults sometimes don't get, I guess some applied things they can do to their lives to make it better. I mean, it's great going to church. It's great going to Wednesday service, and it's awesome praying, but the world is coming at us in so many different directions. And so how do we, make contact with young adults and say, here's some other things we can do? So I kind of have a guest kind of pick one item that they might be struggling with, or their peers might be struggling with, and kind of dig into that a little bit deeper and see if we can provide the audience with maybe something more concrete or more something applicable they can do in their daily lives. So you have something you feel comfortable talking about today?
Yeah. So I had a mentor of mine that had always told me is like, any sin that you have in your life, like the best way to tackle that is to first like bring down to the light. You ever get to know me, like I'll talk about whatever very fast of my sin struggles and whatnot. And one of the things I struggle with is pride, unfortunately, is what a lot of people I feel like struggle with too. It's the root of all sin, I feel like. And like you look at like any sin in like the Bible, it's like, man, like there's some sort of pride in there that they struggle with. And the whole like book of Proverbs just talks about that. And I had not known that until someone, I remember we were in a Bible study and we were just talking and stuff like that, and like talking about sin and like what we struggle with. And I was like, man, like, I don't know what I struggle with. Like, I had to sit there for like literally a minute, just like, what do I struggle with? And I'm like, there it is, pride. And man, since then, like, it's just a constant battle.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you ever read C.S. Lewis. So C.S. Lewis is my favorite author. He is just phenomenal, and he has such a great way of taking a complex subject and making it seem easier to understand. And so C.S. Lewis, which is probably one of the most profound Christian writers of our time, says that he says pride is the root of all sin. And it's basically the most significant sin. That's the one that got the devil kicked out of heaven. And the one thing I thought was so interesting, he said, it's the one sin that's easy to see in someone else, but it's almost impossible to see in yourself unless you're really, really looking for it, or have, the Holy Spirit guiding you, saying, hey, here's something that's just screaming at you, and to deal with it. So, yeah. And so I always thought that was, that's what I struggle with. And so when somebody asks me, they say, hey, Gary, I'd like to say a prayer for you. Anything I can help you with? The first thing I say is, please say a prayer for me and how I battle pride. Because I spent, 20 years in the military. I think in our country especially, but even in the military and young men, a lot of the classes we get on becoming good leaders, becoming good mentors, if you don't check that, it'll lead to basically the wrong kind of pride, because it's like, hey, be confident, be assertive, be this. And if you don't check that, that can turn into a kind of a negative pride.
Yeah. I like talking about our world too, is like the world tells us like to be prideful, to make the most money, to have the dream, to have the life, to be proud of what you have. But really all we can credit that is to God.
I always think that's another great point. Yeah, they talk about the American dream, and it says, hey, you go to college, you get a good job, you vacation in Europe, and then you retire.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well,
Where's that say that in the Bible? That's
Yeah.
like an American dream. That's like
Yeah.
the devil's dream. It's like we should never be. Our whole goal should be, hey, let's just gain stuff, and then quit working. But it's funny how you say that. The world is pushing us toward pride in everything they do, and it's such a subtle thing that you look up one day and you're like, I've lost friends. Didn't realize why I lost them. I look back, I'm like, probably because of my pride and arrogance, and just left unchecked. I think it's very difficult to recognize it unless you're really aware of it and what it causes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how do you deal with that how do you deal with that struggle, or what's your plan right now? How do you deal with that every day?
Yeah. So it's definitely an everyday thing. Some moments you'll be like, okay, like maybe I beat it, but the truth of it is like you can never really defeat sin like that. Like there's several sins that like pride and lust, like you always have to keep looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like even like coming here is like I was just praying to God, like just like God, like make me humble, Lord, make your spirit alive in me, Lord, just like praying and like constantly reminding yourself that like this isn't for me, this is for God.
Mm-hmm.
This is for God's glory. Yeah. And just staying in his word actively is just shown much strength in my life.
Mm-hmm. It is. I think it's being aware of it is monumental, because there's I think sometimes the world confuses young adults, not even young adults, with this whole pride piece. But then also it's like, hey, also we want you to be kind of cowardly or be kind of passive in this. And I think there's where God talks about us being humble. He loves a humble heart, but that never says to be a coward or never being passive and letting things just occur. And there is a reason to get into the Bible, to get into meditation and think about those things and say, how do I decipher that and apply that to my daily life to make sure that I'm not being the negative pride where I'm looking and comparing myself to other people, making myself look better, not being humble, but also having the courage to basically live my life in a way that's bringing more people to Christ. And that's a struggle a lot of people have.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that you just said that. Is like, also at my campus, I'm a leader at Crew, one of our campus ministries on campus. And just being a leader there is like, it's really easy to see yourself as like, like a better Christian than other people are, which is stupid, because like we're all sinful.
Oh yeah.
And like just like when we're sharing with people is like, man, like I did something good and like for the Lord, and it's like, yeah, it's good for the Lord, but like it's not for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like catching yourself, and then it's been really, really difficult, I feel like, for me too.
Yeah, like there's a couple of times I've been asked to give sermons, and I'll start a sermon off, and I have to go back and check and say, am I saying this to glorify me, or am I saying this to glorify Christ? Because the message is, because I don't, it's nice when people come and say, hey man, I didn't know that about you, did this or you did X, Y, and Z. And they go, then you missed the message. I was using that to try to apply a negative of my life to Christ, and how I missed that piece, because we talk about, I think it was a great example when I really try to hone in on this, especially to the younger audience. The Bullitt East high school football team that won the 6A championship, I loved every minute of it. And it is a big deal, but it's so minuscule in our Christian life. And I think we have this piece where we're turning athletics and entertainment into being so important, and it runs 6 days of our week. And all these young adults are growing up thinking, I need to do basketball, but football, AAU this, and this. And I can't go to church now because I got this on Sunday. I can't do this on Wednesday night. And so we have a mixed message where our parents sometimes tell us, you need to be a good Christian. But you don't show me by examples that, hey, you're telling me all my priorities are X, Y, and Z. I don't see Christ in this priority. And I think sometimes it confuses young adults, because what we say is one thing, but what we're promoting is another. And I love athletics, but just like everything else God gave us, it needs to be in perspective. Once it becomes more important than God, then it becomes almost idolatry. And it also affects the way we live our lives. What's our goal is more being in athletics versus a good, strong Christian.
Right.
So how do we, you're a lot younger than I am. So how do we get that message right now into the younger kids? Because you see it where everything right now is pushed toward entertainment, athletics, and we have the leftover kind of for Christ. So how do we get the word out to 16, 17, 18-year-olds that that's just it's great, but we got to keep it in the right perspective?
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that too. Is like, I feel like for me, going back to like high school and stuff like that, is like football started to become my identity. instead of Christ. And I feel like that's a very important message for young adults and young people, is like they're trying to figure out like who they are as a person. And even like coming to college is like, there's a statistic that's like, I don't know, it's like maybe like 2/5 of people that come out of like go to college, like they like stray away from the faith. It's because their identity isn't rooted in Christ like then. So just like being rooted in Christ, first and foremost, as you're going through high school and as you're going through college and stuff like that, is very important to eliminate those idolatries that you may have.
Yes, it's funny. We talk about idolatry, and a lot of times people look at that and say, well, I don't worship any idols. And they have this misconception that an idol has to be like a golden calf. It could be an athlete. It could be you hear people all the time talking about Taylor Swift this and Tiger Woods this and Michael Jordan, and they live their lives by letting these individuals influence them more than Christ. It's like these people have more influence over my life than Jesus Christ does. Or even the telephone, or how we spend our time. It's like we take things that I think God gave us that are good, and we take it to another level, and we lose sight of, hey, we just put something above Christ in this. And how do we check that? And it's difficult because it's all these subtle changes. And you look up one day, you're like, man, I'm spending 6 hours on my phone. Yeah. So that's the part I'm trying, like, how would I convince 16-year-old Gary that basketball wasn't the most important thing at 16? Because at 16, I thought my whole world revolved around basketball. And how do we reach kids? What's the best way of doing that, do you think? Do we have spend more time, maybe having groups going to high schools and doing something, more podcasts? Do we do, I'm trying to think of how do we reach those young adults? Because the world is telling them completely the opposite of what they should know. Yeah. And churches are giving them a message, but they're still, I don't think they're hitting that for that 16, 17-year-old saying, hey, here's how the world's coming at you subtly. So how do we get to them, do you think? What would you recommend for people who have access to do that or have the funds to do it? How do we get to those young kids? Yeah,
that's a great question. I feel like we're starting to see as a generation, seeing like stats and stuff like that, is like people, like young people are looking for stuff. And, a lot of guys too are really like sheltered off to that type of thing, but we're all looking for something to satisfy us, whether that's the worldly pleasures like sex or money or greed. We're all looking for something. And, the good news is that like the best something is Christ. So I truly believe just sharing the good news of him, and really, if they really want to search for that, then they're going to find it in Christ.
Yeah, I try to tell people, especially when I have a couple classes I teach of young adults, and I try to tell them, if one thing I could pass on is everything they told me as a young adult was a lie. It's like, hey, you want a good job because it gives you this. You want to play sports because it does this for you. You want these friends because it does this for you. And I look back and all those decisions had a hook in it. It kind of took me away from my real purpose. And, kind of think of, if I was 16 years old and somebody with influence came to me and said, hey, Gary, just so you know, this is what they told me and this is what it caused. Everything they're selling you right now is a lie. It's an illusion. This fleeting moment of, how good it feels to hit the game-winning jump shot is great. But the purpose of serving Christ, you'll have that. There's a big difference between being happy for a second or joy that we see in as far as the fruit of a spirit, and having, it's not independent or dependent on what happens. Like, I feel joy because I'm serving Christ right now. And I think once people, see that, like you were talking about the serving young kids, how good that feels. I think when people help somebody do that, they'll understand, they'll go, I get so much more joy and purpose out of my life than this versus something over here.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. You brought up a point too, is like the people that may influence, is like, I'm thinking now of athletes and whatnot, like athletes who make Christ their image and whatnot. You look like CJ Stroud in the NFL, after every post game interview, he always says thank God for this and whatnot. And Tim Tebow, one of my favorite athletes of all time, man. And I got the opportunity to sit down and have a little conversation with him, just randomly, and just talking to him and stuff like that. I was like, man, that was awesome.
How'd that come about? Tell us about. That's a good story.
Oh, yeah.
I think the world of Tim Tebow. That man stands on his faith.
Man,
so walk me through that one. I like to hear that.
So, I remember I go to the Southeast, and they were doing, and my granddad is very involved in the ALC Pregnancy Center over in Shepherdsville and E-Town and whatnot, and they were doing a promotional dinner to get like donors and whatnot for their event. So he was invited, and they had 2 extra tickets, and me and my dad jumped in, and I was just there because I knew Tim Tebow was going to be there, and he's going to be a speaker, and I was like, man, this is going to be really cool. And I got talking to Dave Stone, the former pastor at Southeast, and he was sitting with Tim Tebow, and they kept telling me like, man, like Tim Tebow was like Evan's favorite and stuff like that. And Dave Stone looked at me, and he was like, hey, like I got an extra seat open like right here next to me, like right next to Tim Tebow. So I got to talk to him for like 5 minutes. I was freaked out the entire time, but he was such a genuine guy to talk to. Like he's what he says is like what he portrays. And just like getting like people like that who've like done great things, but like it's very rare to see nowadays is like people that have done like monumental things, like won national championships and whatnot, and like not take pride in that, but to give it to God.
Yes.
And just seeing like him do that is like, man, like I can do it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think that's how you can tell worldly from the Christian view is when somebody really promoting Christ, like Tim Tebow or another athlete, they cut them off pretty quickly. They don't like to, they don't like to highlight that. Now, if somebody basically gets caught in a drug ring or certain type of music or certain type of behavior, it seems like they just want to promote that lascivious lifestyle where people think that's just normal. And that's the part that gets me frustrated with athletics and the way that they're sponsored and the way the money's used to promote a negative behavior. And we need more strong athletes that are stand strong for that and take time to do an interview or a podcast and say, hey, just so you know, my most important thing I have is my Christian faith. Like I love Scotty Scheffler, how you know who Scotty Scheffler is? And he'll just stand up and go, I don't care if I hit this putt or not. It's not going to change my life any. My life's rooted in Christ. That's my faith. That's first, then my family. Yeah. And then this game we play that's called golf.
Second.
Yeah. So that's what I wish we had more of that coming out or highlighted so young adults would see that and go, man, there's something good about this.
Oh, yeah. And like going back to that too is like, I mean, God gave these sports and these platforms for good is like, you can spend your life, you can spend your career doing it, but just remember that like Christ is first in that.
Yeah, I think I can't remember the exact verse in the Bible, but I always keep it in mind. Like in Matthew, it talks about people have influence. It says, woe to you that lead people astray.
Yeah.
So these people that have these 5 million people on their platform or these people that are entertainers and they're leading people astray. I think, I'm not Jesus, but I think the consequences, based on what I read, are going to be more severe for them because they have an app, they have a platform, they have people listening to them, and they're choosing to lead people astray versus lead them toward Christ. So I think that would worry me when I read that verse if I was, had 20 million followers and I'm talking about, all the different negative worldly things that I'm doing and I give no glory to Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the one thing I want before we wrap up here, which I've greatly enjoyed this conversation and the whole Tim Tebow thing, I just really admire that man because he's really, I don't know him, but he seems like he stands pretty firm on his faith and he sets a good example for all of us. But I do want to pass on to our audience. If I could, if there's one thing I could recommend to you is take a second and go pick up the book Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. If I was, if President Trump is watching this podcast, I don't know if he follows us or not, but if he does, and he needs help picking out curriculum for the new generation, I think Mere Christianity should be a required read for every high school student. It just basically, like the title says, it's how to the basic points of Christianity. It takes it to a point we all understand. So if you get a chance, please take a second, buy that book, read it. I promise you won't be disappointed. Evan, man, it's just great having you on here today, man. I really enjoyed it. Good luck at Western. And if I ever can do anything for you at Murray State, just let me know.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you for spending your time with us today. We hope you found a useful tactic you can apply to your own situation. We're building a community here. Your feedback is important. If you discovered an approach that works, make sure you comment below. The one thing we don't want to do is to keep that solution a secret. Understand there are people struggling and searching for an answer to a similar issue. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at the Applied Christianity Podcast. Looking forward to our next episode. Until then, remember, the Applied Christianity Podcast is about real solutions for real people.